to have a good understanding of kind of where we've come from, what we've done, what we deal with kind of internally as well, mentally, emotionally, et cetera, is really, really important. Physical as well. And so I'm super stoked to moderate. It's on like if it's on me. I didn't get them the run a show until last night. I appreciate the panelists for being flexible and dealing with me on that. And just in case anybody didn't have a chance to read the bios, maybe treated the bios like I treated the reading for class this weekend. Let's start with intros. And so, Cam, would love to start with you. If we could just kind of go through like, what your service was, any highlights there, what you do now, what you're studying, what your track is at SOM, and whatever you feel like sharing.
Sure, appreciate it, Rob, and thank you, Bree and Marianne and Jamie and team for putting this on. So for me, it all started at the Air Force Academy. When I graduated, I was asked to come back for a year as a diversity admissions advisor and a congressional liaison. So spent a year talking to a whole lot of congressmen and a whole lot of high schoolers. That was kind of an interesting experience. After that, I went into my actual like career field, contracting. And contracting is the function that buys all products and services that the military needs. And I think actually every federal agency is going to have a contracting group. I did that in Italy, Kyrgyzstan, Colorado, and eventually was asked to come to the DoD level to do launch vehicles and rocket hardware. So I was doing contracts for like NASA, NRO, Air Force. At that point, I was a captain and I was kind of burning out and needed to change of pace. So I left and joined Pratt & Whitney, which is a company that manufactures aircraft engines. And I was negotiating against the military on their fighter aircraft engine contracts. So the F-22, F-35 production and sustainment contracts. Now I work for a company, BAE Systems. We do a lot of things, but my business area kind of owns the combat vehicle space. So I have our next generation robotic combat vehicles, autonomous combat vehicle contracts. So I sell killer robots or keep troops out of harm's way, depending on your perspective. And I'm in the sustainability track here. Thanks.
Super cool. That's awesome. I always love seeing those the new gadgets come out. So if you ever need a place to T&E, hit me up. Got my backyard. Right on. Nikki, let's go to you. Before this, Nikki, I confess, I kind of heard of Jigsaw like in the periphery, probably a very busy year for you. But we'll get to that. But anyway, we'd love to hear about your background.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks, Rob. And thanks again to everyone who helped put this together. No, it's an early morning and it's been definitely a grind of a week. So really glad to see many of your faces bright and early. So I am a West Point graduate. I served in the Army for a little over 5 years. I attained the rank of captain. I was a logistician, and similarly to any kind of title that you have in the private sector, those roles and responsibilities can vary within an industry and within a company. And so that is exactly the same in the military. So depending on the unit that you're with, then again, what you are overseeing and what you're responsible for varies. And so I was initially with the 25th Infantry Division out of Schofield Barracks, Hawaii, and I deployed with them to Jalalabad, Afghanistan. I was there for a year, and that spanned everything from personnel to budget management to leading combined operations patrols. And then I did a big pivot in my career in the military, and it was actually out of Washington, D.C., where then I was part of a unit, the 3rd Infantry Regiment, where we oversaw ceremonies, prestigious ceremonies for high government officials and foreign dignitaries. And so that was then being able to exercise different skills under the logistics umbrella. And then from there, out of the military, I actually went into finance. So I was at Goldman Sachs in wealth management, and yeah, did portfolio management there for a bit, and then moved over to Google and into tech. And I was able to apply my skills in portfolio management, did that on the business side at Google. And then, as Rob mentioned, then my most recent, well, it's actually now been a few years. I've been working at Jigsaw, and we're basically a mission-driven team within Alphabet. And we basically, our mission is to use technology to protect users from digital harm. And so the span of projects that we oversee, we look at future threats pertaining to censorship, harassment, disinformation. And so, yes, it has been quite the year, to say the least. And I'm head of strategy and operations for that team. And I'm class of 22 and in sustainability.
Super cool. We'd love to hear about your time in JBAD. Offline. We can do that offline. Craig, let's hear from you. Oh, funny story too. Craig was like, dude, I think you were like a couple classes ahead of me at OCS. And I couldn't even remember my OCS class number. I still don't. But Craig, go ahead.
It's on the back of your sweatshirt.
That's fair. That's fair. However, on my first deployment, my wife threw away all my military clothes. True fact. My short shorts that I loved, gone. T-shirts that I loved, gone. Sweatshirts, gone. They're gone.
It's a shame. So Craig Miniter, naval officer, as Rob said, him and I, we earned our commission through OCS instead of, going through one of the service academies. Just a little ribbon for the other guys. So I'm a surface warfare officer by trade. What does that mean? We like to say we're jack of all trades, master of none. We're the guys and gals out there driving ships, fighting ships. So my first ship was the USS Nicholas. It was a frigate out of Norfolk. I did mainly C5I and which is comms. And then electrical, mentioned the electrical plant there. From there, we deployed to AFRICOM to do anti-piracy, where we actually were the first crew to get 5 pirates who actually shot at us. From there, I did a Southcom deployment, anti-narcotics in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific. From there, I transitioned to staff tour float as part of Amphibious Squadron 8. There, I was the Assistant Combat Systems Officer doing anti-terrorism force protection. And I did an IA as part of it's an individual augmentee in support of the war on terror as part of a combined destroyer squadron on the Truman deployment. After that, it was time for my shore duty. I went up to the Naval Academy Prep School, where I was a company officer. And I also got my master's degree from the War College. Then I transitioned to the reserves. As a reserve officer, I was assistant officer in charge of the naval part of 3rd Battalion, 14th Marines, Naval Gunfire Liaison. And then I got picked up for command, and I commanded a cargo float rig team. And I just am finishing up my second command tour as part of a submarine maintenance unit, and also supporting Second Fleet's anti-submarine warfare. On the civilian side, I transitioned into gas quality control, and decided that I didn't want to spend 3 hours commuting every day from New York City. So I transitioned into gas training, natural gas pipelines. And then I got moved into the role I am now, where I'm managing processes and technologies. So mainly I focus on mobility solutions at the national and global levels. for things like vegetation management and gas engineering and electrical engineering. So kind of me in a nutshell.
The big nutshell. There's a lot going on there, Craig. A lot going on there. But I empathize, and I've been poked that I have to give an intro as well, and to keep things on track, I'll be super quick. I graduated from Amherst College in 2008, where I played hockey. Go Jeffs. We're the Mammoths now. Sorry, Brian, if you're on the call. Although we are number 2, you're number 1. And double majored in poli-sci and Russian, and went to OCS 2008 with orders to Buds. Went through Buds and SQT. It was a great time. Sucked in the moment, but just awesome. And it was so simple. It was so simple. Life was so simple. You had to wake up, follow a schedule, do it over again every day. That was it. Went to SEAL Team 2, did 2 pumps to Afghanistan, had a great time on those deployments. First one was kind of slow, did some work with Lithuanian SOF in the winter. TB, the Taliban aren't that active in the winter, at least where we were. So second deployment was a lot more kinetic, a lot more fun. Had plans to stay in forever, kind of go down the rabbit hole. Wifey was like, that's cool, you can do it. I'm not coming along for that ride. And so, loved her too much, loved my stepson too much to prioritize that life over them. And I knew that it's a fast moving train. You get on, you enjoy the ride, you get off, somebody else gets back on and backfills what you were doing. So that's cool. Transitioned to the reserves in 2013, moved up to Albany, New York, started working in private wealth management. Wasn't really enamored with it. They called me for a deployment. I said, yes, please. Did it in 2017, came back. Wasn't making enough dough to pay the bills. As people know, started driving for Uber night and on the weekends while also working for the company that didn't want me to drive for Uber because they were helping their clients invest in Uber, and it would have been really bad press. It would have been worse press if they didn't let me drive, and then I ended up on the street. So made the change. Had the opportunity to join Point 72 in New York City. Did that, joining market intelligence research, proprietary research arm of the firm. That kind of transitioned to a role in recruiting and helping build our team out. We had quite a bit of fat trimming as we did a reorg. And that's where I am today, focusing on campus recruitment, PhD recruitment, DE&I initiatives within market intelligence at Point 72. I love the work. It's great. It's crushing my soul right now. For any of you that have kids or going to have kids, when they get to the point in life where they're looking for an internship, tell them, listen, just do what you're told. Don't bother the recruiter. Don't bother the recruiter. Don't email them. Don't email them if your assessment's broken and they told you to email the company that administers the assessment. Just a tip. Cool. So, look, topic is, or at least, some of the topics today, transition, and we'll keep the conversation as fluid as possible. But I think the transition piece is really important. It's important to talk about. It's something that everybody on the panel has gone through, and that other veterans have either that are in our collective programs have either gone through or are in the process of going through. Most of you will be hiring people at some point, if you have already, maybe, but who will be going through this process or have gone through this process. And so I think it's really important to talk about. And the first question, just to kind of kick things off, is I would love to hear about how you all draw on your military experience in your current roles, right? I think we've all had a wide variety of things that we've done and seen. Some may impact positively, some may impact negatively, but I'm more interested on kind of how you draw on your time in the military in your current roles. And Nikki, let's start with you, because honestly, like, the Jigsaw stuff sounds awesome. I'm sure there's got to be some overlap there and things that you draw upon that help you absolutely crush that.
Thanks so much, Rob. Appreciate the advice around kids. I'm 8.5 months pregnant, so.
Yeah. Congrats, that's sick.
Oh, thank you. But no, this is such a great question, because I will say that specifically to Definitely within Jigsaw, for me, this has been, I think, one of just the best jobs because I was really able to extract my favorite parts of different roles and aspects of my professional career. And they've all kind of come to head at my time at Jigsaw. And again, a lot of it is because it's mission based. And, I think the things that you learn as you're going through different pivots is not only what you enjoy, but also what you don't. And that's actually probably a more important signal. And drawing on specifically my experience in the military and how it applies to my time at Jigsaw is I'd actually say a lot of it is around my systems thinking and planning process. And I know that that sounds slightly lame, but the reason for it is, I don't even think I realized even to the extent of my knowledge or how much I was exercising this like planning muscle. Thinking back to just my time even in Afghanistan, and I know everyone in this panel, Rob, yourself, like could draw upon this, but the level of detail that you have to think about when you're leading, again, like combined operations patrols. It's like you're working with different teams with different skill sets, and you're thinking through every different kind of variable and then thinking of contingencies for those variables. So it's just the depth of how you are trying to plan for everything, because again, lives are on the line. It just then is such a skill set that I have really been able to use in so many different ways since making the move outside the military. And what's interesting is while it's absolutely a gift, because it almost comes across as natural or instinctual, but I've been doing it for so many years and I'm continuing to hone in on that craft. And but actually, where it almost becomes then something that I have to work on is the fact that, especially on a team like Jigsaw, where we're forecasting and we are really trying to not just look at the immediate and what's going on right now, but we're thinking 10 steps ahead. That just draws on particularly well, just because that's exactly, again, what we're supposed to be doing. That's how my mind kind of works. But even within my team, I will say that there are moments that because it becomes so natural, I'm not necessarily maybe taking the time to share all of those intermediate steps. And so I'm already thinking ahead. I feel like everyone's on the same page. And then it's like, oh, wait, no, wait, I need to take a moment and then share what's actually going on in my mind. And so it's funny. It definitely is something that has really been able to play as a strength. But it's also something where I'm also further cultivating it by just making sure that whatever is actually going on in my mind, that I'm sharing it across the group. So I'll just keep it that for now.
Right on. No, that's awesome. Yeah, no, planning's key. And I found that oftentimes, like, a lot of people don't do that. Surprisingly, people that get to like heightened levels of organizations and companies just don't do that.
Precisely. No,
Yeah.
it really is the truth. And so you're sometimes in a room and you think, well, of course everyone's thinking this, and they're not. So
right.
Don't make assumptions.
That's right. Cool. Craig, let's turn to you. You're still in the reserves. And I'd be interested to hear about how you kind of leverage your experience, while from active duty, but also like in your, week to week, month to month, work in the reserves into your civilian career.
So, like Nikki was saying, we're groomed as officers to do a lot of the planning, and to think about the what ifs. And another thing that we're really good at, and the saying is true: even the best of plans don't survive first contact with the enemy. So you can come up with these great plans, and then once you start executing, something's bound to fall apart and not work. And so going through my career, both active duty and the reserves, is being able to pivot or think on my feet of, okay, this didn't work. We have to still meet the end mission. How are we going to do that? And so you kind of go from like the McPP, the Marine Corps planning process, long form, right? And then you pivot right into, now it didn't work. Now we have to go to the R2P2, the rapid response planning process type, where we just have to think on our feet and we have to cut everything down and formulate a kind of a new off-road to still meet the mission. So I think that kind of really prepared me well for coming in, where, you know, a lot of times in my civilian roles, people would come up with kind of wishy-washy plans, and I'd sit there and pull my hair out thinking, why aren't you guys thinking more about this? Or, you know, why haven't you thought of, you know, what could go wrong? And I find that I do that very often, play the devil's advocate, as my class of 22 classmates can attest to. I kind of like that role, even if I don't necessarily think it's true. Like I'll still do the what ifs, the red cell, if you will, part of the war game, just to try to break down the plan to see if there's major holes. And that I don't see that happening a lot on the corporate side. And so I think that's a major thing that veterans can bring to the, especially, you know, the planning cells or the officers bring to the table of being able to think on your feet, and when disaster, so to speak, strikes, you know, still stand up and just persevere and push through.
Yeah, right on. And I do think one thing I've noticed as well, Craig, you bring up a great point, is I think like that red teaming will happen at certain echelons of a given company, right? But then down lower, it doesn't. And oftentimes, like when we're transitioning and you have people transitioning fresh out of the military, they may not be going at that echelon of authority that is actually doing that red teaming. And so it becomes even more important that that's happening where they do enter the org. So great point. Cam, let's go to you. You're in an interesting spot because you kind of are like, you know, you're working with government contracts, right? And so
Right.
I'd be interested to hear how you leverage that time, because I always remember when contractors would come in and like, oh man, like, dude, I was a SEAL back in the Gulf War, and they're like, give me like this new piece of kit, and I'd be all like, all right, cool, dude, like, yeah, I'll hear what you got to say. I'll take it for a test ride. Interested to hear how you do it.
Yeah, so for me, it's you know, that experience is super applicable because my customer is the military. So just understanding, you know, what their perspective is on defense contractors and kind of what matters to them and what adds value for the warfighter. That's definitely a competitive advantage. And I totally agree that those principles that we learn in the military, being resilient, kind of doing what it takes to get the mission done. Those are things that all become in the civilian world. They're all indicators of like high potential future leaders, you know. So you know, it's served me well to just remember those characteristics and then bring them with me as I go to different civilian orgs. Another big thing is really challenging to be a young military officer and have this team of people who are all, you know, older than you but still have to lead, and it kind of forges you into a really good leader, one who respects and understands their people and is listening and who can kind of learn quickly. And I think high performing people in corporate America kind of end up in that same place over and over. So as you promote, you kind of end up in a new space where you you know, have to have those similar skills to do well and lead well.
Cool. Yeah, no, super helpful. All right. So like talking about transition, continuing on the thread, continue to pull. Did you, like, when I transitioned, like I didn't, or I was in the process of doing it, I honestly did feel lost, right? And there are these tools out there now where it's like this MOS. So for people that don't know, like the MOS is like your designator. So like whatever you do in the military will have like an MOS or you know, a different code, you know, that corresponds to that. And so there's like there are these tools out there. They're like, hey, oh, here's your MOS or whatever it is. Like you could be good at this. And like I never used those tools, but I didn't know. I'm like, well, fuck, like what job am I going to do that like is going to require me to, you know how to clear a house on nods? None, right? Unless it's like joining the bureau or whatever. But like private sector, it's a lot harder. And so I'm curious, like, did you all know really how to deploy your strengths in the private sector when you were transitioning? Did you know in the back of your mind, like what you had kind of in the hip pocket that you could leverage, or did you struggle with that? Cam, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so I kind of cheated by going into the exact same career field. So contracting is really framed by like federal acquisition and those regulations. Like once you're comfortable with that, it's very easy to either sit on the government side or the contractor side and like come to a deal. Um, so I was fortunate to have like a technical skill set in the military that I can immediately leverage outside. But I wasn't at first. I wasn't set on joining a defense contractor. So I wasn't quite sure on how to leverage those skills. I think today I have a better understanding of how I would have sold those skills to some civilian employer who didn't quite understand my background. But it's challenging for people coming out of the military to see how they fit into the world.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally true. Nikki, how about you? Like you didn't end up at Jigsaw right away, right? So it's like
Mhm.
I'd be interested to hear, like were you just kind of like Goldman sounds like a great company, like they're reputable, they're one of the best in the street, like I'll go there if they're willing to give me a shot. Or did you have like particular skills you're like I'm going to leverage?
Yeah, so great question. And I will say that as much as I thought that I was prepared, no, absolutely not. I was definitely looking at different type. Cam made a much smarter move, obviously being able to build off of his immediate skills in the military and make that transition to the private sector. I wanted to make a little bit of a shift, but I thought some of the similarities around organizational structure, hierarchy. Um, I went into wealth management because of also being able to work with people and manage their own personal portfolios. So I felt like between trading and working with the markets, but then also working with people and really getting to know them more intimately, I thought that was just going to be a really great sweet spot. I was wrong, and that's okay. And it was really a great learning moment for me, because the other thing that I also learned during that time was I actually really cared. And I mentioned this back as a logistician, there were just a wealth and a breadth of opportunities. And so that internal mobility was super important to me. And as a wealth manager, I was never going to get that. And so for me, I was then able to take those skills from Goldman, also from the military, be able to hone in on how I talk about my time. You're kind of given certain catchphrases, or you think that you're translating it well and it falls flat. You get kind of some stares and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but you continue to sort of exercise that muscle. And then that was where I was able to do portfolio management at Google. And Google, I thought there was no way it was going to be the right fit for me. I was like, okay, it's all over the place. It's like, I'm not a software engineer. How am I going to fit? And there's actually, you should Google the images of like Google's organizational structure, and you'll see there's lines all over the place. They pride themselves on, not having a hierarchy, but it's now a global corporation. So yes, there is some hierarchy, but in any case, making the move over there, it's because every few years they really encourage you to be on different teams, to try different roles. And that really directly applies to like things that I loved about the military. And so having been on the business side at Google, really kind of understanding the tech landscape, then it really afforded me, like when I did join Jigsaw, it was one for a few different reasons. Like I felt like, oh, this sounds so cheesy, but like I really did feel kind of at home, where I was like, okay, from day one, I am working with people that really get my background, because we do have folks who have been in government, but we also, I work with a lot of, software engineers. So, and to Craig's point earlier, where playing devil's advocate and asking tough questions and really diving in, oh, I've now been at Jigsaw for a little over 3 years. And I will say that is like our bread and butter. Like that's what we do for everything. If anything, we over index, and we're like, we work through every detail, and we're always trying to play again, well, we think this, but what about X, Y, and Z? And so I think from day one, being able to jump in and really leverage, again, a collection of experiences is what made this particular role so fulfilling. But I will tell you, I'm years removed from the military. It took a very long time. You think, oh, of course I can, manage a team or manage operations. And, there's a lot of ambiguity in the language that's used in the private sector. And you're like, hello, do you know the extent of what I've done in the military? Of course I can handle this. But there's a disconnect, just because, again, unless you're really in it or you've experienced it, you don't understand the gravity. And so it really does just take time, and it becomes an art to be able to articulate those skills and translate it in a way that it does resonate with recruiters in the private sector. So, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I totally empathize with that. Company I started with, and when I first transitioned, was owned by Goldman. So it was kind of like, nah, I'm out. No offense, Renee, if you're on the call. And Craig, so you're still kind of like building skills, right? Whether it be more leadership or even if some are still technical at this point in the reserves. And I'm interested to hear how you kind of cross-pollinate those things with your civilian job.
So I guess the best way to look at it is, what I kind of do in the military and the civilian are very different, right? So in the military, I'm running my unit. I'm the de facto CEO of the unit, and so there's a lot of autonomy there. And the buck stops with me with that, and kind of where it's the same in my civilian job is, I run, whether it's a program or a project, and that's my program or project, and it fits into the bigger puzzle, and that's kind of working for a multinational company, at least our parent company, and then also working within like the military units, right? You can look at it as being, you're a puzzle piece and you fit into a puzzle, but that puzzle you fits into an even bigger puzzle, which fits into an even bigger puzzle. So kind of starting out as a really junior officer and knowing, okay, this is how I fit into how the ship operates, is pretty much the scope of what you understand. But then as you move up in the ranks, you begin to understand how that ship fits into, the Fifth Fleet area, and then how the Fifth Fleet area injects into the overall national security strategy of the president, and just being able to see it at that big macro global level, and seeing how like that 18-year-old Marine with a rifle in Afghanistan affects national security at the presidential level, and being able to understand how everything fits together like that. And then transitioning into my company Avangrid, who's owned by Iberdrola, which is one of the top 5, largest utility companies in the world. Like how my job doing mobility solutions fits into our state and federal regulator requirements for like vegetation management or gas engineering or electrical engineering, and how that fits into our company's goals of supplying energy and heat to millions of Americans, and how that affects our Scottish Power people or our Neo Energy down in Brazil, or Iberdrola in Spain, and just how things I'm working on in the United States as part of like a global group will affect, Scottish Power, because they're going to be taking on like the systems we use, because we use the best system out of all of our countries. And so seeing how the little things, the butterfly effect, if you will, of the little things that happen here can affect the company overall, I think is a huge advantage.
Yeah, no, I think that's I think that's spot on. Appreciate that. So I see, like, in the chat that we've got maybe one question, and like I want to make sure that we do have time for questions at the end, but I'm gonna keep rolling just for the panelists, so you're tracking like with the run of show here, because I think this next question is important. I think it's important for people that are listening to understand that transitioning can be really fucking hard, really hard. And so, I think, Craig, we'll stick with you first. Hardest part of your transition, and advice that you either give your current sailors in your reserve unit, or would give to somebody getting ready to transition.
So I think Nikki really touched on it when she said that it's not easy to translate what you did in the military into the civilian. Like if you look at my resume, you saw that I was responsible for over $100 million worth of equipment as a early 20 something. Like, that doesn't make sense to people in the civilian world. They don't get that kind of experience where, boom, okay, you just graduated OCS or the academy, and now you're on your ship, and you're in charge of every single piece of comms gear on the ship and making sure that you can talk off ship. And that doesn't make sense to them, because usually you have this slow build process where you're thrown into the leadership role in the military. And so I know Gina kind of asked a question, and to kind of touch on it, having companies understand what your military, like what you did in the military, and how it could be beneficial to them. And I think if more companies had military liaisons, not necessarily active people, but people who have served, who can sit there and be like, yeah, okay, this is what they did, and this is how it'll benefit us, who kind of have that corporate and military, so they can kind of do the translation between the two much easier than a transitioning service member who probably doesn't have any corporate experience. As far as advice, this is the advice that I've given to numerous sailors. You're going to have bad leadership and coworkers, whether you're on the civilian side or the military side. Don't let one or two bad experiences make you transition. Make sure it's what you really want to do. Just because you had a really bad chief or bad department head on this one ship, don't just get out because of that one experience, because there's so many different experiences you can have that are just amazing. So make sure it's really what's right for you, and you're not doing it just because of one bad experience.
Cool. Super helpful. Cam.
Yeah. So I would add that in the military, you never really meet a stranger. Like, there's this deep connection and like common values with everyone in the military. And then of course, like, every base, domestic and abroad, is like a city, so you're just surrounded, not just in your work environment, but socially, with people who have just some kind of like shared value system, or shared experiences. And when you leave, that doesn't exist outside of the military. And it can be a bit lonely, kind of transitioning into a workforce where you are kind of surrounded by strangers, and you're not sure where people are coming from, where your social life that was very military oriented is now kind of blown up. So a piece of advice I would have for someone transitioning is just to actively seek out like a new community, a new network, but also don't let go of the one you established in the military, because they're going to be your foundation as you move forward.
Yeah, I think that's key. And I think that touches to a question that's in the chat too from Michael, as far as like, and if anybody has thoughts on this too, I would love to hear it. So military transition services, to exploit to the fullest. I think the biggest thing, like Cam touched on, is networking. It's the most important. Like the military will give you various different. I can't even remember what it was called. Like it was called like TAP or something like that. When I went through, I called the guy. I'm like, listen, write my name down. I'm not showing up. And like he was just like, I'm like, seriously, dude, I'm not coming. Just write my name down. And I probably should have gone, because I probably would have learned about all of the resources that are there. But like for me, the biggest thing was networking, and like time wasted not networking was not going to be as helpful. And I think Cam, you're bang on, man. Like it's the networks that you have developed, and it's networks that you want to develop that are super important. Nikki, I would love to hear the hardest part of your transition and what advice you would give.
Yeah, well, I will say the collection of Craig, Cam, Rob's responses, I think, are completely spot on. And so I'm actually going to say something that may not actually be quite as intuitive, but it's actually asking the questions about who a military service member or a veteran is almost outside of the military. I think that there is, and this is actually something that more recently I've actually been able to kind of dig into, because I think when you are active duty, you are going to be making that transition. You're not necessarily, like, for so many different reasons, you're worried about, hey, I want to make sure that I have a paycheck, that I can take care of my family. There's all these other like more immediate issues that you're trying to take care of. And so you're not maybe taking the time to reflect, be in tune with all of your feelings, being vulnerable. And for me, that has taken a long time, and it's been a very long process to do so. And that is sort of what, I kind of we were also talking about, like, when we do make that transition within companies, and what makes it challenging is there's these unwritten rules and the traditions. Like, you may be highly competent, but there's so much of the unspoken that it just takes time in order to really tackle that steep learning curve. And so that's not even just the military, that's any of you, if you're looking to make a change within a company or an industry. And so I think, again, as veterans, our time of service is something that most of us are so proud of. And it's something that, of course, is a significant part of who we are, but we do also possess other identities. There are other parts of us that really make us who we are. And I actually think that could be a really important part of that process when, you are looking to recruit or bring folks on, like, also challenge them to think more about who they are even outside of the military, because it's just a different lens. It's a different type of question. I give that advice to veterans and to service members that are transitioning. It's just a different perspective that actually can help you tell your story more effectively. So just wanted to highlight that.
Nice. Cool. So I think we're getting close to time, but I saw Marianne had a question about like advice around pivoting. And I think, like, if others have comments, feel free to opine. And then Peter, I think you might have had a question that you said you want to ask too, so I want to get to that. But I think Marianne, I think about it like you're playing a game of chess while you're building the chessboard, is how I think about it. Seriously, right? Like, you've got all these pieces that you need to be moving. And while you're building the very foundation that is going to make that game playable. And so that foundation could be like financial security. It could be, making sure that your family is ready for what you're about to undertake, all while moving these pieces across the board, i.e. like networking, learning, like getting yourself ready for these different opportunities, etc., all while not showing your current kind of position what you are thinking of doing. right? Which is kind of like that mental game. So it's pretty tough, but it's like you have to make sure that that board is strong, that the foundations that are in place, or that, because you're going to need support to make a pivot. Like for me, like I tried to do it on my own, and I ended up at the bottom of a bottle every single night, right? And so like that's not a place to do it. And so like making sure you have people to help you build that board, I think, is really important. Peter, did you want to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it. Speaking of pivot, I'm gonna pivot the conversation selfishly to myself. I have a I have an issue that I've seen the military, my military coworkers and employees get around very easy, and I was wondering if you can offer some guidance. I'm in the healthcare sector. I have several levels of management underneath me, and I'm having difficulty, as you quite know, with people burning out. And I find that my managerials, or I'm sorry, those underneath me, that have a military experience, seem to be able to do two things. One, there's a certain level of grit that they can just kind of pound through, certainly during 2020 in the healthcare field. But also, I feel like this is my question, they have a sense of scope in what they can do, and it allows them to be a little bit more sustainable as a manager. And I'm having difficulty finding that or knowing how to cultivate that. And so really my problem is people are just burning out, and particularly my managers. So do you know of an opportunity, or what does the military do to help people understand their scope and allow them to be responsible for all this and push through and I guess I'm not wording it right, but I think you got my drift.
Yeah, that's really tough. I think the military gets people there by, one, asking people to go beyond what they think their own limits are in some way, right? So, you have some concept of self and what your limits might be, and you will break those in your time in the military, and then also forcing us to keep things in perspective. So, it's like a life or death situation in the military. It's usually not that way outside of the military. So when you combine those two things, it makes for a really kind of resilient leader, and one who has grit. I don't know how to replicate that, or how to create that outside of the military, but I think it helps to ask people just to be cognizant of their own capabilities, their own limits, and also kind of the context of their situation. So yeah, that might be a starting point.
Yeah, thank you.
If I could
Yeah.
offer a couple of things. So not to sound cliche or catchy at all, but the military's, or at least from my experience, has been really big into self-care as well. So what are you doing to decompress? Are you, working really hard on the 9 to 5 and then going out and slim some weights, to kind of decompress? What are you doing to take care of yourself? Are you taking a day off here or there just to, do nothing if that's what you like to do, or, go on the water, or go fishing, or go hunting, or what are you doing to decompress? Because that's a huge thing. Like, and I know Rob can talk about this as a team guy, but you're in theater, you're pushing. When you get back to your fob or whatever it is, what are you doing to decompress? What are you doing to kind of work through that? And your teammates are big on that, talking to them. They're kind of like free therapy, right? You're talking to other people who are living through what you're doing. Are you talking and communicating with them? And that's what we're really good at and really bad at, especially with the high suicide rates with the vets, right? Like we're really good while we're doing the things that we're doing in talking with each other, but then when we get out, we're bad at talking with each other still. So that's one place we can work on. And another way to kind of, you're talking about persevere through, remember the Titans, I think it was, where the lineman said, I can only, do a bear crawl for 10 yards with someone on my back. And they said, okay, blindfolded him, put a dude on his back, just a little bit farther, just a little bit farther, just a little bit farther. He didn't know how far he was going, but he kept on just saying, little bit farther. And by the time he took the blindfold off, he was 100 yards down the field. So it's just kind of eating that elephant bite by bite, and just, sometimes when you're in the thick of it, you can't look, 6 months ahead. You just have to look, okay, what's the next step? What's the next step? What's the next step? You have to keep in mind what the overall goal is, but just taking it step by step by step. And that can help with the decompressions in there.
Yeah, I'll try. Sorry, go ahead, Nikki. Go.
No.
I think it's really, this is probably the most important question right now.
Mhm.
I think it's critical.
Yeah, I was really just to add that, again, especially as a manager, having been that in the military, but then even now in the private sector, and especially as we're thinking about just like we're in the midst of the pandemic and everyone is processing, again, the challenges in different ways. And to add on to what Cam and Craig have said, the other thing that's really helpful is like you almost have like your group of just managers where they can also have sort of that support system within themselves where they can then just, feel really comfortable sort of sharing like their own struggles, whether it's just being totally worn out, but like that safe space just to be able to know that like, hey, you're not alone, we're all in it kind of together. But then the other part of it too is that as a manager, it's instinctual just to want to give and to, be there for your reports. But the only way that you're able to be the best manager is if you're taking care of yourself. And so, it's just, again, continually setting those tones, that condition where it's like, take time off, because what ends up happening, and like, I will say I'm even guilty of it, it's like you share that message and you make sure that like your reports are taking vacation time or whatever it may be to decompress, but then you're not doing it yourself. And so it's just really important that you continue just to hone in on that message. And then also to make sure that they have their own separate group where they can speak freely about kind of their own obstacles and struggles that they're going through.
Yeah, I think too, Peter, really quickly, I know it's time. We gotta jump to class. If I don't get coffee before class, like I probably just won't show up. But like, I think what's really, really important here is like, you look at like the SEAL pipeline, right? Like, call it what, maybe 20 to 30% make it through. The people that had like families or kids, I would say it was maybe 1% that made it through. All I had to focus on was getting up every single day and making it to the next meal. And you could do that for 9 months, 12 months at a clip, 2 years, make it to the next meal, make it to the next meal. If I had a family or kids and other things to worry about, fucking no way I make it through that. And so I think it's really important that healthcare providers, companies, hospitals, whatever, think about what their people have going on at home and try to alleviate that weight, help carry that weight so that they're not carrying that on the job. I think that's huge. So, oh wait, we start at 10 today. Carlos just told me. So we have a little bit of time. Is that true? No. Marianne's like, no, that's not true. We don't have time. Okay, I'm going to get coffee. I'm going to shut up. Any other alibis?
No, Rob, our class starts at 10. The 2022s don't, but we start at 10.
Oh, thank God. Thank God. Carlos, how are you awake right now? So early.
I needed to see Rob.
I appreciate that. This is great. Okay, this has been awesome. If there aren't any other questions, I want to thank our panelists so much. Nikki, Cam, Craig, really, really enjoyed sharing the time and looking forward to hopefully getting together in person in the future. And to the POP organizers, thank you for giving us the invite.
Thank you guys. You're awesome.
Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.